Why unrestricted trivialism cannot be refuted by purely propositional internal critique. Introduction. Welcome to a layman-friendly guide to a non-trivial meta-theoretic impossibility result. Here is the one-sentence result. From an ordinary non-trivial standpoint, if trivialism commits itself to every proposition, then it commits itself both to every proposed internal objection and to the negation of that objection. Therefore, its bare propositional commitments contain no one-sided, internally generated reason that selects reject trivialism rather than do not reject trivialism. Please note an important scope for this discussion. This argument does not attempt to prove that trivialism is true, rational, useful, or immune to every external criticism. It proves a narrower result about purely propositional internal refutation, evaluated from a non-trivial perspective. 1. The whole idea in ordinary English. Trivialism is the view that everything is true. That means that for any statement you can name, the unrestricted trivialist says it is true. But the trivialist also says its negation is true because that negation is another statement. Take a tiny example. Consider the statement, trivialism is irrational. Unrestricted trivialism says that statement is true. It also says trivialism is not irrational is true. So merely getting the trivialist's own commitments to contain the first statement gives us no one-sided verdict against trivialism. A normal internal refutation tries to use a worldview's own commitments against it. The critic wants to say, by your own standards, this result counts against your theory. Our result asks whether unrestricted trivialism contains any purely propositional resource that can favor a defeating proposition over its negation. It does not. The reason is extremely simple. Unrestricted trivialism has already taken every proposition into its commitment set. Nothing propositionally one-sided is left inside it. 2. What trivialism means. Do not confuse trivialism with dialetheism. Dialetheism says that some contradictions are true. Trivialism says that every proposition is true. For this discussion, unrestricted trivialism means exactly the maximally strong propositional version. Every formula in the relevant language belongs to the worldview's propositional commitment set. 3. What internal critique means here. We are considering a purely propositional, discriminating internal refutation. Purely propositional means that the premises, norms, defeat conditions, and verdicts doing the refuting work are represented as propositions in the worldview's own commitment language. Discriminating means that the worldview's own propositional commitments supply a reason on one side without supplying the negation with the same basic commitment status. This restriction is intentional. We are not claiming to have ruled out non-propositional decision procedures or external ranking functions. 4. The formal setup. We now state the assumptions needed for the mathematical core in plain English. Let us imagine a set containing every well-formed formula in our language. Assume the language has a negation operation, meaning that negating a well-formed formula produces another well-formed formula. For unrestricted trivialism, every formula is a commitment. Therefore, the propositional commitment set of trivialism is exactly the whole set of all formulas. There is no formula outside the trivialist commitment set. 5. The mathematical theorem. No negation asymmetric commitments. We can define the negation asymmetric part of any commitment set as the collection of formulas that belong to the set while their negations do not. In plain English, this contains exactly those propositions that the worldview commits to, while not also committing to their negations. Our theorem states, if unrestricted trivialism is committed to every formula, then trivialism has no negation asymmetric commitments at all. The asymmetric part of its commitment set is completely empty. Here is the step-by-step proof in plain English. Step 1. Pick any well-formed formula whatsoever. Step 2. Trivialism contains every formula, so it contains the one we picked. Step 3. The negation of our formula is also a well-formed formula. Step 4. Since trivialism contains every formula, it also contains the negation. Step 5. Therefore, our chosen formula cannot be a one-sided commitment, because we just showed its negation is also in the commitment set. Step 6. Since our initial formula was chosen completely at random, nothing special depended on it. No formula belongs to the asymmetric set. Step 7. Therefore, the asymmetric part of trivialism's commitment set is empty. End of proof. 6. The bridge from the theorem to internal refutation. The theorem is purely mathematical. To obtain the philosophical conclusion, we state a bridge condition. If a worldview admits a successful, purely propositional, discriminating internal refutation, then its propositional commitments must contain at least one relevant one-sided commitment. Some defeating proposition must be present while its negation is absent. If both the proposed defeating claim and its negation have the same bare commitment status, the commitment set itself has not selected the defeating side. 7. The internal refutation impossibility corollary. Now combine the mathematical theorem with the bridge condition. Trivialism has no negation asymmetric commitments at all. But if a successful internal refutation existed, it would require trivialism to have at least one one-sided commitment. Those two claims cannot both hold. Therefore, unrestricted trivialism does not admit a successful, purely propositional, discriminating internal refutation. 8. Why familiar internal objections fail. Consider common objections. If you say trivialism is self-refuting, trivialism contains that proposition, but it also contains trivialism is not self-refuting. If you say this internal critique succeeds, trivialism contains that sentence, but also the sentence, this internal critique does not succeed. The bare commitment structure provides no propositional asymmetry that tells us why the defeating statement should govern revision while its negation should not. 9. The extra ranking structure objection. A critic might say, perhaps trivialism contains both the objection and its negation, but it also has a ranking function that assigns greater priority to the objection. Our theorem does not rule out such an enriched structure. But notice what changed. The ranking function is additional structure. If the critic needs a ranking rule to make the objection win over its negation, then the external rule, not the bare propositional content of trivialism, is doing the decisive selection work. If the ranking rule itself is merely expressed as another proposition, trivialism just includes the negation of that ranking proposition too. Conclusion. The purely mathematical fact is that unrestricted trivialism has an empty negation asymmetric commitment set. The philosophical impossibility result follows when we add the explicit requirement that a successful, purely propositional internal refutation must obtain a one-sided defeating commitment from the target's own resources. From our non-trivial standpoint, bare unrestricted trivialism simply cannot satisfy that requirement. Thank you for listening. Philosophical implications of the impossibility result. Beyond its formal mechanics, this result exposes a fundamental dialectical boundary for meta-theoretic critique. Informally, philosophers often assume that any false or problematic worldview can be brought down from within by exposing its own self-defeating commitments. This proof demonstrates that such an assumption fails when applied to unrestricted trivialism. Because trivialism saturates the entire propositional space, it offers no asymmetric grip, no structural lever that favors a defeating proposition over its negation. Consequently, any critic who claims to achieve a one-sided internal refutation of trivialism is inevitably engaging in a dialectical illusion. They are quietly smuggling in an external selection rule or ranking mechanism and attributing that discriminating power to the trivialist system itself. Ultimately, if trivialism is to be rejected, it cannot be through the passive extraction of its internal propositional resources, but through explicit external epistemological anchors.